Last week, we each spent $10,000 to attend a 2-day mastermind by Taylor Welch, who has a $100 million net worth. And in this video, we're going to share everything we learned in the mastermind. So welcome to the video, bro. Good to have you.
As always, a pleasure.
So we're in Ibiza right now, just to kind of spend a week to recap everything that's happened in the mastermind. It has been a lot of crazy input for the whole 2 days, right? And we just wanted to take some time to go through everything that we've learned and shared with you guys. So we can kind of take our learnings, reflect on them and share them with you, so you can also take something from the mastermind. And basically the 2 days were split into 3 different speakers. First of all, Taylor Welch himself. So quick background to Taylor Welch. He basically was one of the first clients from Sam Ovens, and he scaled his company to over 70 million in yearly revenue, right? And now he exited the business. So he's the first speaker, and he basically hosted the mastermind with all of the attendees. The second speaker is Ashton, Shanks, right now the CEO of Traffic and Funnels, and he also has his own direct response agency, which is basically one of the biggest direct response agencies in America. And then also Brady Edwards. Brady Edwards is the creative director of Mr. Beast. Everybody should be familiar with Mr. Beast, basically the biggest YouTube channel online with, I think, like 156 million subscribers right now. He directed a lot of the videos and was even inside of some of the videos until today. And yeah, I'm gonna just start with Taylor Welch because he spent the most time talking, and his stuff was also super interesting. So the thing that we can start with is the first principle thinking, because that's how he started in all of this, right? So he always said you gotta break it down, you gotta take it to the meta and not be in the weeds if you're like making decisions or something. So he always took a step back and said you gotta break it down to the first principles, right? So maybe you want to go ahead with that.
Yeah, I found it interesting that he was starting with that point, because every time you spend so much money on like a mastermind or something, you expect like the most newest, cutting-edge, sophisticated micro adjustments in doing stuff, and you're always eager to know everything there and write everything down. Then he started like from the meta perspective in order to really give a reasoning behind his thinking and how he approaches topics. And I found it really reassuring to hear about like the thought process behind all of the topics that came afterwards. And the first principle thinking, in my opinion, is like one of the most critical skills that you could train yourself with, because I think if you just follow like the narrative of the market or like what everyone else is doing, you're missing the point and the nuances why you're doing it in the first place. And by thinking about stuff and problems on a first principle base, this allows you to transcend to a level above the market where all of the competitors are like fighting for scraps, and you can capture like the most market share for the stuff that you're building. And I mean, he basically grew Traffic and Funnels to 4 million a month in a matter of like 3 years, which is insane. And you can't just do that by following the common principles that are in the market.
Yeah.
And you can only do that by innovating stuff. And the way to innovate that is better than just trusting a gut feeling, have like a first principle approach in order to see what is the problem we're trying to solve, what is the easiest way to solve it, and what would be the most beneficial way to solve it. And the first intro from him I thought was pretty awesome in order to really tone it down and help you to cultivate first principle thinking there.
Yeah, sweet. And also, just for you guys listening, basically what he said was the biggest want of people is that they mate with others, right? So that you can pass on your genes and you get children and your legacy lives on. And the biggest fear is being alone, so not being able to mate or dying. So if you break everything down to these two, right, this is the basis of all decision making. So whether you make decisions on getting a job, where you live, where you buy stuff, right? And that's super interesting because you can apply it to everything. You can apply it to how you run your business. You can apply it to how do you market your product or your service to your audience. Because we as people, we will always go down certain program based on our evolutionary programming, right? So if we have the consciousness of the biggest desire of people and also the biggest fears of people, this makes it easier for us to really trigger that and work with that.
100%. And I think you brought up that topic by the approach that if you want to bulletproof your business and transcend above like common problems or like recession thoughts and stuff, you can be pretty bulletproof when you just cultivate the desires of people and try to emulate what people are after. And in order to do that, you really have to hone down on what exactly do people want from you, and then delivering it to them. It's not just figuring it out, it's then finding a solution that allows you to capture some value but provide more value to a lot of people. And in every company he built, and he has like a track record of 3 companies that he scaled to multiple 8 figures, that this was the common denominator between them. And channeling desire, or like even creating desire from people through marketing and advertising, is like the best paid skill that you could have. And I really appreciated his perspective on breaking it down to the evolutionary principles, because it's easy to assume that the desires are changing in modern times, but if you really condense it and think, why are people afraid of being lonely? Why are people afraid of dying? Or like, why are people after a certain status or like mating values? It's always for the evolutionary principles, and having some blinders on and focusing on delivering what people want or helping them avoid the stuff that they don't want is always a good play to play.
And then going on to the next point that he talked about, he talked a lot about sales and buying and like the decision-making process behind purchasing something. And he said, just to break it down for you, into 4 reasons why prospects say no. First of all, is they miss the trust or rapport in you.
Yeah.
Secondly, and this is what I found really interesting, is they mistrust in themselves. The third thing is time, so that they are missing the urgency to make the decision right now. And the fourth one is need. They simply don't feel like they need it. So what happens oftentimes in the marketing is that you build a lot of trust between you and them. You give them the urgency and you tell them it's super, super important and they really need it. But then you forget something like, okay, they have to trust themselves and be aligned with that they can achieve what they want with your product.
Yeah. I mean, he derived that by listening to like over 7,000 sales calls that he did at his company.
Yeah.
And this really hit home for me, because most of the time we're spending so much effort in order to convey that the people can trust us. And we just forget empowering people to trust themselves with your solution to achieve the desired outcome that you're promising them. So if your marketing is not hitting home in a way where you're thinking, I'm ticking all the boxes, like on a logical sense, it would just make sense that people are buying it, but you're missing like the amount of traction that you want to go after, it's always good to take a step back and see, is the method or the mechanism you're selling achievable or like a worthwhile time investment for the people that you're trying to sell to, and putting more emphasis on middle of the funnel content in order to build the conviction in the prospects to use your solution in a way where they are really eager in getting this stuff to work, makes just so much sense, and all of your funnels are way more efficient. So this is a big part, I think, is missing on the biggest conversion campaigns that you're running.
And this also goes into my next big block of notes, which I named Quantum Thoughts, because, and really quickly for you with the background, basically quantum is the name for like stuff that you cannot really measure, right? It's like the energy, the aura, and everything that you can feel it, but it's not really quantifiable, right?
Yeah.
So and a quick example for this would be that you have been in a restaurant, you've sat down in a party or something, and then this one person walks through the door and like all of the eyes are on him, and you're like, holy fuck, he has a crazy aura, he has a crazy energy, and the room changes, right? And that's what we've spent a lot of time talking about the stuff that you cannot really measure, because it's like it's a feeling, it's an energy. And one thing that I really, really liked about this is he said, people feel you before they hear you. And this is based on the concept that you always have an impact on people, whether that's really direct through your communication, or whether it's really subtle through your gesture and your mimics and your tonality and your state. So what Taylor said is that you can program yourself to be in a certain state because you're always going to leave an impression on other people. And this impression is always going to be based on your state, right? Whether I'm sitting down like this and I'm talking really slow,
Yeah.
and then Sebastian is maybe feeling some sort of stress or negative emotions, or if I'm putting myself in like a really solid, good state, like an upward body, higher
Yeah.
tonality, talking quicker, then you can instantly feel another emotion, right? So what he said was it's super important that you program yourself to be in a certain state so you can then evoke the same state in your prospect, right? The same state of like the certainty, the good emotions, and this like, so they're acting, for example, if you want to sell them something.
This is such an important topic because most of the time we are analyzing brands, is it like on the consulting space or the e-com space, it's always not just looking at the numbers or at the creatives and stuff, it's always more subliminal, looking at the vibe of the brand. And the highest scaling brands that we're seeing have like a feel to them. Like it just feels like a complete brand. It lacks nothing. It has a certain perceived value, like an intrinsic value in there. And the vibe of the brand is just something totally different than you're just seeing a typical dropshipping ad where someone is just using like a Canva creative and has like a monotonous voice over them. But I think if you really want to excel at something, you should really commit in delivering the best vibe possible, even if it's a personal brand or like at an e-com brand, and see what are the values that you want to convey and project onto the prospects that you're selling to. And being conscious of that basically is half of the rent in order to delivering that. If you're unconscious about that, I think it's pretty easy to fall in the trap of delivering a bad vibe. But if you are conscious of that, I think it makes such a huge difference and a big impact on the results that you're getting from your marketing efforts.
And that's also, you made a good point, is that sometimes people like half-ass the creatives or like the design of the landing page or like the copy or something, and then for the prospect and the user that's going through the customer journey, something feels off, something doesn't feel congruent, right? And that's when they will not purchase or they will just abandon the checkout process because they have this weird gut instinct that's telling them you shouldn't buy from this brand. While on the other hand side, if you go the extra mile and you put in all of the effort into the brand, into the funnel, into the ads, and making everything cohesive and congruent, then it's a really good feeling for them. And then when they make this last decision of, should I buy this now or not, they have this good feeling which pushes them over the edge.
Totally. And I think most of the time, if you are selling something to someone via ads, most of the people, I mean, they have nothing against buying good stuff, but they also want to protect like their money and their income. So they're judging you by finding excuses not to buy. And if you have logical breaches in your customer journey and you're not delivering the vibe that you want in the stuff that you're putting out, you're just giving them an easy excuse to abandon ship with you.
Yeah. Another thing that I found super interesting, and I also talked about this in one of the other videos, we all have mirroring neurons in our brain, right? This is how newborns learn. Like if you're like a small child, then you learn by mirroring people. You mirror what they say and how they speak and how they look and everything. So we have these neurons in our brain that just mirror everything we see from our environment and the people that we talk to. And what we also have is something that's called mimetic desire. So when we see somebody getting something or having something, we get this desire. And you're probably familiar with scrolling through Instagram or seeing a nice YouTube or TikTok video, and then afterwards you're like, oh damn, I'm an e-com, but he's like a trader or he's whatever, he's doing real estate, I should move my business model. Or you see somebody with a nice car or a nice watch or a nice house, and then you're like, oh, I want a nice car and a nice watch and a nice house. Because you're mirroring everything you see in your brain, and then you're creating this desire. So on the one hand side, you should be really conscious of how you use that and what happens. For example, if you've just scrolled an hour through TikTok and then you have a lot of desire inside of you, then you should be conscious about that it's not something that you wanted from yourself, but something that happened externally. You have been externally programmed in that sense. And secondly, you can use it in your marketing and sales, because you can create this mimetic desire in your prospects by talking about their desired state and by a future potential outcome, or by what other clients of yours have achieved, so that you can then create this mimetic desire in the prospect and sell them on something. So I really, really like this concept, and we've been using that with like other concepts to describe it, and we've also used it like in the marketing, but this is a super interesting one once you have the consciousness about it.
Totally. And by this is always like a topic of, if you're aware of it, you can make use of it. And for me, I was familiar with like the gist of it, but not like putting a name onto it. I just had like always a gut feeling that you can project your desires onto something, or you are mirroring the desires of someone else. But having this concept laid out just cleared up so much stuff for me in order to really understand what that is. And I just, every time you hear someone at a very high level talk about this stuff, you just realize that there's way more to succeeding in business than just mastering tactics and being way more aware of like human psychology.
Yeah, definitely. Let me go through the notes here. Another thing that I have is the certainty. So we talked about this 2 days ago too, is that nothing grows without a vacuum.
Yeah.
Right, so I want to
Crazy
hear your
powerful.
thoughts on this, because you had a lot of interesting input on it when we spoke about it the last time.
Yeah, I think creating vacuum is like one of the craziest techniques or approaches that you could do to achieve something new. Taylor basically said where he wanted to go in life, there was no space for traffic and funnels. So he had to create the vacuum of not having traffic and funnels to do something new. And at every stage that you're at in your business or life journey, it's always very hard to reach the next level if you are clinging on to the last level you're at. And I had that myself when I was abandoning my first university degree, then moving on to the second one, and then finishing that, and deciding not to go into law practice and going into the marketing space. And then having my first big client and stepping down as a CMO afterwards, running an agency, shutting down the agency, opening a consulting business. It always took way more time than it needed because I was afraid of creating a vacuum. But every time I really cut the ties with the old stuff in order to move on to like a way bigger state, I was just missing the certainty that this is what I want to do or that I deserve to have. And Taylor basically said that if you're looking through the future lens or seeing your future self in 10 to 15 years and you have a healthy self-esteem that you are destined to do something great, it makes it way easier to create vacuum for you in order to reach the next level and tap into your full potential. And after hearing that, I am definitely will be way more certain in creating certain vacuums in order to excel the level or like to transcend from the level I'm at to reach the next level, because through the longer time frame I'm more than certain that we're going to reach that. But I'm also very interested in your thoughts, because your business and personal journey always included a lot of vacuum that you had.
Yeah, so for me personally, it was the first time in the beginning of the business journey when I was still in university, but I really wanted to move to the next stage.
Yeah.
So with like the first couple of things that I tried on with like reselling, Amazon FBA, e-commerce and everything, I never grew past a certain point. So I knew when I started like the agency and the service-based business that I need to create like a vacuum and create. For me, it was like a tunnel vision, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it wasn't about something, okay, what do I have to focus on, but rather like, what do I have to cut? So I was
Yeah.
like hyper obsessed with cutting as much as possible. So I cut gym time down, I cut wasted time down, I cut friends, I cut spending time with people. I basically cut a lot of things. So I created this moat around me with just like one tunnel vision,
Yeah.
where at the end of the tunnel there was like running a successful agency. And I didn't move out of the tunnel until I reached the goal. So that was like the first time. And then second time was like 3-4 months into the business when we made like the first like good money, apart from being like a student or from like the perspective of a student, and saved like a couple of G's. And then I decided to invest every single cent I've earned until that date, because I got a bit the feeling of being comfortable now, right? Because you don't need much as a student. You spend like $1,200 a month or
Yeah.
something, and then if you have like 2, 3, 4, 5 grand a month, it's like way too much, and you
Yeah,
don't
it
need
is.
it. So I started getting a bit comfortable and opened up the tunnel a bit. And then I was like, no, I gotta push myself again to really get into that state again. So I invested everything into business coaching, which was super helpful. And then I had it like numerous times again through my journey. But something that I see from like the external perspective with like some of the clients or like people I have in my network is that they're doing drop shipping or they run a brand, they scale it to like 300-400K a month, and then it's like a good amount of money, good amount of free cash flow, and then they're getting comfortable in that stage because they're like, okay, I'm making 30, 40, 50,000 a month, right? That I can spend. Why should I push the store to like $1 million a month right now? So I have like 100, 200K.
Yeah.
Why should I do that? I don't see the sense in it. So they go to Dubai, they go to Bali, they enjoy life, right? And then like they wonder why after a certain time frame it goes down again.
Yeah.
Because they didn't invest into it anymore.
Yeah, and I think if you're thinking about there's two ways to make a car go faster, it's either putting more horsepower in or cutting weight there.
Yeah.
And I think you have to balance those two. Of course, it's awesome to increase your performance output by investing like in your skills or like pushing more ad spend or scaling there. But you also have to be very conscious of not getting any bloat on your on your body basically. So you're just cutting the weight in order to stay agile, and combining those two and having higher aspirations and trying to move out of a comfortable state is definitely the way to go. Because if you have something that great, if you have something that where you struck a nerve and something is popping off, you should ride it as hard as possible, because why not? I mean, you have the chance and you only have one life. Why not be excellent in the way that you are maximizing your full potential in the stuff that you're doing? And I had that too. Like, I had to move certain social circles to the side and get myself familiar with people earning way more money than I am, in order to realize that there's way more that I wasn't aware of when I was a student.
Good point. Also, what I wrote down is, because we've talked about the comfortable zone and like the reframing and putting yourself into a vacuum, is that failure is a puzzle and you have to figure it out. So failure isn't like a state or like something that you cannot fix or cannot change, but failure is only failure until you learn from it, right?
Yeah.
And until you put the pieces together and you figure out what lesson did it want to teach you. So really, like they want to.
Totally.
Let me see.
Afterwards, we had the talk from Ashton,
Yeah.
where he was talking about the dark art
Yeah.
of advertising.
There was
So deep psychological shit.
Yeah. Okay, sweet. Let's move into that. So, Ashton killed that one. Dark art advertising. I want to spend a second talking about what he means by dark art advertising. So, I was super familiar with like a lot of the concepts from the presentation, because that's what we spent like the last couple of years studying, because it's like the basis of conversion rate optimization, landing pages, and copy, is that you have this understanding of the human brain and the psychology behind it, right? Like, what makes people think, what makes people change their mind, what makes people buy, right? What motivates people, what drives people, and how can you push people over the edge of making a decision. And basically, we've talked about this too, is that there are a lot of evolutionary programs running through your mind all the time that you may be familiar with or conscious with, and some of them are unconscious programs that your mind is running through. And your brain also has certain biases, right? A lot of you will be familiar with the social proof. If we are in a group of 20 people and all of the 20 people have a MacBook and say the MacBook is amazing, then you are going to be more likely to buy a MacBook, because you have the social proof, you have the validation from the group, right? So there are certain biases just like that, which manipulate you into making a certain decision. So we're just going to go through some of them to share them with you because they're super interesting for the marketing and then also for the landing pages and funnels. So the first thing is the psychology of persuasion. And the biggest takeaway for me was the identification, right?
Yeah.
This is a super, super big one.
I love
What
that
are your
one.
thoughts on that?
So identification, I think, is one of the most powerful persuasion tactics if you're doing it in a way where you're doing it great. Like, I think there is no place to try to half-ass that. You really have to nail that concept. You have to nail all of the concepts for them to work. But identification is just something that no one else can copy in a way where you are helping them realize their ideal self because they're projecting their views onto you or your brand. And if you can hone down on building up the image that you want to create there, either by being like very good at delivering the transformation or like having a product that is perfect for a certain niche, you can create a pulling effect onto your brand that basically is able to decrease your CPAs by like 90 to 95% because you just have like the biggest identification with your brand as possible. And I think as a brand you really have to try what are you trying to achieve with your brand, who are you selling to, and what do you want to be perceived at. So identification is like a big lever, I think, to pull.
Yeah, definitely. Now, so just to give you some actionable takeaways, identification goes a lot into what is the feeling, what do you want, and what do you don't want, right? So you basically create a circle with certain values and a certain mission and certain names and certain verbs and certain words, right?
And either are both like equally important, what you want and what you don't want. Most
you
of
have
the
to stand
people,
for something and you have to stand against something.
most of the people are just standing for something, but there's like way more power sometimes in standing against stuff.
Yeah, and it's not stuff like our products are vegan, right, or eco-friendly or something.
Maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah, 10 years ago there was a USP, but nowadays it's really about like the feeling that you create. So you have to think about how can I build a tribe around the product that I have, and how can I really give value to the tribe, and how can I also create connect the tribe with each other. So one example would be from Kino Body, where we are running this like new offer. So the new offer that we are running is we wanted to sell more of the testosterone supplement, and instead of just selling like a bottle of testosterone supplement, we created a 30-day challenge with like the testosterone supplement, pre-workout booster, nutrition guide, training guide, and we also build a community around it so that you not only purchase a bottle of supplements, but if you purchase this like new offer, this 30-day challenge, you purchase the community, you purchase the identification, you purchase the feeling that you belong to a group of people who are in the same state, who are all working towards the same goal, and that's why this offer is crushing so much.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to that because that was summarized pretty perfectly.
Thank you, bro. Appreciate it. But yeah, that's a super big one, like the identification. And another one that I really like is the art of the autonomy bias, right? You want to make your customers feel like they are in control of the purchase decision. And an anecdote I'd like to tell about that is that my NLP trainer, so neuro-linguistic programming trainer, similar to the stuff that Tony Robbins does, he always liked to say, with your communication, you can reach 4 goals, right? You can communicate to people and make them do what you want to and they feel good. They can do what you want but they feel bad. They will not do what you want and feel good.
Yeah.
Or they will not do what you want and they will feel bad, right? And if you look at these 4 goals that you can have with your communication, which one do you want, right?
Yeah.
For me, and this is what he taught me, is that you communicate to people, you manipulate them into doing what you want them to do, and they feel good about it. This should be the only logical goal that you have with your communication, right? Because otherwise, why would you talk to people? I wouldn't talk to Sebastian and make him not do something, right?
Yeah.
And feel bad about it. Like, that would just be stupid. So with this bias, it's that you give your prospect, right, you give them the feeling that they make the purchase decision. So you're not pushed it on them, but sometimes you take a step back and you're like, hey, you're making this decision all by yourself, even though you used a lot of the other biases that we've talked about to really persuade them subtly, and then they make the decision themselves.
Yes, I really love this bias because I think if you want to scale to the levels that you are after, if you want to think big, you can't just get to that point by manipulating people into giving them no choice. You actively have to bribe them into, or like, not even bribe them, to groom them basically onto autonomy. Because if your brand is only good at forcing people to buy from you through squeeze pages or something, or like aggressive up and down sells, you will have your scaling capacities there. But if you can shift your marketing in a way where people are feeling like, I do have a choice, the only question is, do I want it now or like in a week? Or do I want one of it or like three of it? Or do I want a different color from it? Or do I want to just put my name on the list and be notified when the next product is dropping? So diversifying your marketing mix into assets that promote autonomy in your prospects makes total sense and can be hardly copied from your competitors because it's a very high skill to actively pursue autonomy or like produce autonomy and then utilizing that to increase your conversions. So I mean, I like hard stuff because most of the people can't do hard stuff. It's hard to do that.
Yeah.
But it's worthwhile to do it.
Yeah, definitely. Sweet. Yeah, that was basically most of the stuff from the first day. So what I want to do is I want to move into the second day and really talk about what Brady Edwards taught, because he basically broke down the secrets behind why Mr. Beast grew so fast. And one of the biggest ideas that he pushed was you need to make your audience fall in love with your content, right? And it's especially focused on entertaining, right? And storytelling.
Yeah.
So when you think about your creatives, your videos, a VSL, a UGC piece, it's not always just advertising, right? Plainly saying, hey, this is the product, buy the product, but it should really be focused on like storytelling or evoking a certain emotion, or entertaining them, right?
Yeah.
Making the content funny somehow.
So I was always asking myself how Mr. Beast popped off that hard.
Yeah.
And hearing from them that it wasn't just luck or like an arbitrary glitch in the YouTube algorithm, but it was highly engineered from A to Z. Like they're thinking about concepts that are just made for virality, and then they're just hyper optimizing every part of their content production in a way where you basically have no choice but to love that, because they're going through all the emotions, they're triggering all of your curiosities, they are trying to really entertain you and have no second of boredom inside there. And hearing from them how they're segmenting all of the content pieces and even like analyzing their watch times by the second and asking themselves why the frame produced a drop in watch time was so cool to hear, because you're always thinking about how are the best 0.01% optimizing their stuff, or if they're just winging it, but they are actively optimizing every part of it, and a big part of that is like the best storytelling that you could do. And you did some examples there which were just insane and off the cuff, but it just made sense for me to spend more time in every piece of advertising that we're doing in telling better stories that are better for people, for their attention spans, because after all, you can say what you want, we have low attention spans, but we could watch like 4 hours on Netflix.
Yeah.
So there's a difference between them. I mean, people have no problem binge watching 10 episodes of Game of Thrones or something, but they're bored from a 3-second TikTok.
Yeah.
So if you can make your stuff worthwhile watching, you can just capture way more attention, and you're not a slave to the attention degradation of your clients.
And also what I wrote down, it's super important that you keep like the human touch, because now that AI is being distributed and automations are being distributed for content creation and content marketing, the level of content and the personal touch of content is being taken away, right?
Yeah.
So the market is just being flooded with this AI generated content and people miss the personal connection. So you today more than ever can stand out by having this personal touch, by having a personality in your content.
Yeah. I think the personality always sold superior, but right now you have like a commoditized wave of content coming onto the market, even with all of the pretty basic real stuff, and everyone is trying to shock you on some TikToks. You can just stand out by really putting your personality on the line and bringing personality onto your brand. So I think the times of having just faceless brands without mission statements, with incognito founders and stuff will be way harder right now, because this stuff is just popping off way more. But what always exceeds or like excels at a higher level is if you bring some founder branding onto it, if you bring some personality onto your brand, or if you're having a personal brand, to remove the filter of trying to sound like everyone else, but to be like just yourself in front of the camera instead of a different person.
Yeah. Sweet. Then let's move on to the last session of Taylor. I really want to round up this video with like the kind of mindset session from Taylor, because that was super interesting on the second day. He talked a lot about bulletproofing your business and also about the mindset. And the first thing that I want to move into is the capacity for tension and how to deal with tension in your business. So a lot of times we as entrepreneurs, we get fatigued.
Yeah.
And then we try to avoid tension and stress because we're tired, right? So everything in your business and the success comes down to your tolerance that you have for tension and how much tension you can have, right? Before breaking down or having a burnout. And really interesting, he said that tension happens in the mind more than everything else. And that's the same thing that my NLP coach always says, is that you have to ask yourself, where's the feeling? If I say I'm stressed by my boss or by the business or whatever, like in which person is the feeling? Who is creating this feeling in themselves, right? It's me. So I have the control about that. And tension should really be used as a tool for growth. And you also have to think about your mind similar to how you think about a muscle and training in the gym, right? In the gym, you're always tiring your muscles and you're working out and then you're giving it a rest period. So you should take the same approach for your brain and the mind and the capacity for tension. So if it's a muscle, then we have to work a certain amount of time and we have to kind of stretch the capacity and tire it. But then we also got to take a step back and give it time to relax and re-energize and grow.
That really hit home with me, to be honest, because I'm like a normally anxious person, if I choose to identify with that. But it's always that someone else can't put emotions into you. Like, you're creating your stress responses by the way that you are triggered, and increasing your stress tolerance just gives you way more power in dealing with conflicts. And what he basically said is, if you are avoiding conflicts, you're just asking for trouble in the long run.
Yeah.
It's not like picking fights with people, but more like facing the hard challenges in your business the second they arise, or even trying to provoke certain scenarios where you're forced to deal with stressors. Because if you try to skip the line and just go to the good part without getting punched in the face, you will have like a nasty awakening once shit hits the fan. And you don't want that. So the first step is, of course, increasing your stress resistance. You do that, with staying clear-headed, being aware of the programs that are running inside you, and then not letting it compound onto big stressors where you are heavily pushed against the wall, but trying to deal with stuff once it arises, and having like more like small slaps to the face instead of big fists onto your eyes, basically. And I think every founder should be aware of that. That is part of the journey and you can't avoid it. And the most fragile business is the one that is not experiencing challenges in the short run.
Yeah, super, super important point. You have to be comfortable with getting punched in the face and punching back. It's not, you cannot navigate through the risk and around the problems, because then you will just occur debt, a lot of debt. It's the same principle from what Sam Ovens teaches. If you're like skating a long time without running into problems, or just like not going through the problems or solving them, then at a certain point you will just get this huge fist, this huge punch in your face where you have to solve all of that. Let me see if I have one last concept that's super, super important. What was your biggest takeaway from the Mastermind?
I think the biggest takeaway from me was the distinction between fragility and anti-fragility, because he basically said, does your business get stronger when it faces adversity, or does it crumble? And you really have to engineer your business, no matter what the business model is that you're running, and try to make it anti-fragile. And when he was talking about the difference between them, that was just opening up so many new levels in my mind, to be honest. It's like, if you have a fragile business, you just know what to do. If you know what not to do, you have an anti-fragile business, because you're operating from principles and not just from rules that are applicable when everything goes right. And stuff like avoiding the bad stuff and staying on your lane gives you way more capacity in order to deal with the stressors. And the best way to win at the game is to be in it for the long run. And you can only be comfortable in the long run if you try to make everything as anti-fragile as possible. And that hit home with me, because after being in the game for like a couple of years now and turning 30 next year, I am definitely thinking about the next 10 years in business, and not just the next year as I was when I was 20 years old. Then I was just thinking about how can I make the most out of the next year, and maybe I'm done after that. But lengthening the time horizon that you're looking at and excelling at having an anti-fragile or like bulletproof business makes just so much sense if you're viewing business as an infinite game instead of something that you have to check off and then you're done with it. So it was more like the long-term perspective and what that means for your business. If you have to play the long-term game, that just means that your business has to be built up in a way where it's long-term friendly, basically.
Yeah, I really like that. For me, the last thing to round that up is the difference between fragility and anti-fragility. With fragility is that you have a desire, you want something, and anti-fragility is that the expectation that you already have it. You're able to see yourself in a future state and then take that future state and bring it into your current situation. And then it's more an expectation of you gotta chase towards that, but it's not like a question of yes or no, but rather when you're going to get that.
Yeah, I can totally sign that off. Perfect, man. Nice video.
Then see you soon, guys. Hope you enjoyed, and let me know what you've learned in the comments down below.